Hello there. This is Suzi Steer from the Tree Conference, and I would like to introduce somebody who is from the TreeSisters, who has an opportunity for us to work together around the situation in Brazil. So my name is Suzi Steer. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Leticia. I'm a Brazilian based in the UK, and I am very worried and alarmed with what is happening in Brazil or about to happen in Brazil at the moment.
So would you mind describing what is happening and what the political situation is?
Sure. So just briefly, I just first describe, I'm someone that, although I live in the UK, because people might think I'm been distant from Brazil for a long time, I've actually traveled Brazil extensively as a photojournalist, as a filmmaker, and I've traveled especially around the Amazon. So we live in such a massive country. There are lots of people from south of Brazil don't even know our forest. But I can say I have traveled and spent a lot of time with Amazonian tribes and in the forest. What's happening in Brazil right now? We are going to have a second round of our elections, our presidential elections, and we happen to have a candidate coming in who was a bit of a laughable character until not long ago, until a couple of years. He's been an MP for 27 years, and he now is poised to actually win our elections. And he's a extreme right guy who has extreme right visions for what his president, his time in power would bring. And we are very worried, and the country is extremely profoundly divided. And we are very worried for different reasons. He's very much a guy who will persecute minorities. The LGBT community is very scared. He doesn't have any respect, he doesn't hold any respect for women, Black people, indigenous communities. It's actually quite incredible to talk about it, because you wouldn't think that a guy like that could be considered for president. He's actually more dangerous and more outrageous than Trump.
So would you give us some examples of some of his policies, the kind of key ones that you're aware of?
Well, he says that minorities have no any rights, so therefore indigenous people don't deserve any land, even though this obviously is part of our constitution and is written in our constitution. He says that children should be learning from a young age to deal with weapons, and because we need to have an armed society so we can actually fight crime. He says that so hard to. He says the Amazon should be opened because, of course, it's a resource, and we should, make revenues to the country by having cattle and soya into our, exploiting that as a revenue to the country.
And also extractive industries, the mineral wealth's underneath the ground.
Of course, once he opens, to foreign multinationals, we know the riches that are there. We know that indigenous people are keys, and that land, their key a key point why there is still some sort of preservation of the Amazon. Everyone is really alarmed. There's so many policies and things that his plan of government is bringing that we actually are saying, oh my God. And he's actually, his vice president candidate is a general, and a reformed, retired general. And they talk a lot about bringing back the dictatorship if it's needed to, if something that is needed to. He talks about exterminating his opposition. So only last week he talked on a rally. He doesn't come to rallies. He uses social media. He doesn't come to in present. So he rings and he gets a screen, and people are literally watching him on the streets, but on a big screen. And he only said last week that once he's in power, which is trusting he will be, he very much the opposition party and everyone that's supporting the opposition party should be exterminated. So the language is very...
So it's very tough language, and it would be really fun, wouldn't it, if we're working with the Tree Sisters and with other people online who have like an extraordinary love and passion for both the Amazon, both for trees, for the wisdom and the libraries that are held in Brazil. If we were giving ourselves the opportunity to generate equally powerful, and if not stronger, visions and narratives around actually what we would like to see for Brazil, so that we can really support the different voices in Brazil to feel the unity of a whole lot of other people who really see them for what they're capable of and see the gifts of all of those different, the diversity of life and of humans that Brazil is such a gift of. So is there so one of the things I'm aware of, for example, is that we have to take total responsibility for what's happening in South America, because in the case of the EU, as much as there may be some letters from heads of state saying naughty guy, the truth is that the EU trade deals with South America dramatically increase quotas for beef and for soya. These are the key things that he's saying that he will be deforesting the Amazon in order to provide. So he has had a very strong message from the Europeans that this is a move forward that they will both support financially and socially, and through the kind of big business connections. We also know through the massive increase in smart technologies and mobile phones and production that without the minerals that are underneath the ground in the Amazon, a lot of these telecommunication companies and extractive industries won't be able to continue their hold of power over people's minds, over people's imaginations. And so this guy is a pawn, and he is embarrassing himself in his own land to let these power big boys that he thinks he can be impressed by come in and control and dominate what happens on that landmass. And so obviously what we'd really love to do, at the same time as over here in this country, we consider it our responsibility to make sure that both our government and the government of the EU understand their role in forcing deforestation of the Amazon through their appalling trade deals, which have not been run through any serious understanding of the hydrological cycle and the potential for the further deforestation knocking out the hydrological cycle in South America, and therefore our own weather systems coming over here and our ability to grow food. But also that it is possible as an enormous earth community to move towards halting deforestation through making deforestation of ancient growth or growth forests a crime and the international courts. And so we're aware that there's a lot that we can be doing here, that we need to be doing to support that. But we're also really keen that the people of Brazil know how much we value what they know, what they protect, what they take care of, and the education and the wealth of that land. So would you mind saying just a tiny bit maybe about the biodiversity, and also what's going on for the cattle that we're looking at to be, what is the health and welfare around the cows that we're talking about?
I mean, we obviously, we are one of the biggest exporters of beef, Brazil. And some years back already, I did some research and we did a film with the BBC where we saw that we had, two cattle per person. So Brazil is 200 million people. Imagine though you might have a herd of 400 million cattle, and we export cattle. There has been that push from Mato Grosso, which is to a state below the Amazon, pushing into the Amazon, and there were corridors already happening to export cattle from the coast on Belém, which is the coast where the river Amazon kind of flows to. From there, exporting cattle even to the Middle East. And at the time, I was looking into cattle that would be actually already started. We didn't manage to film that because it was something quite close. That would be exported live to the Middle East, so they could have it allow me to kill in the way they needed to. But I just wanted to come back a little bit on the love thing, because you said, you know, the three sisters getting together and sharing this love and showing how much we can bring. It's very important that we tap into half of the population of Brazil. The country is almost split in half. The guy has 56% of the voters at the moment, against 49% of the opposition guy. And so half of this population is tapping into that. They want to go against all this, you know, talk of war and extremism. They are going into the streets and they're talking about love. The candidate himself, the opposition candidate himself, is talking about love. His vice president is a woman, the vice president candidate. So there is a lot of that to tap into. Half of this population of voters are feeling completely bereft and orphaned and really desperate. And there's loads of movements. There's 4 million women. One day, a month or so ago, one woman started a group on Facebook, Women Against Bolsonaro. It's the name of the Brazilian fascist candidate. And 4 million women very quickly created this group, and they are in there, they're talking, they're going to the streets, a little bit like the Me Too movement that took women marches, you know, back early in the year. They had been on the street, so we can tap into that energy. Women are there fighting. There is loads of people that are completely appalled of what's happening.
So what's the name of the opposition candidate? Yeah. What's the name of the candidate that's talking about love and has a woman vice president?
Yeah, so he's the opposite candidate. And the reason why he's not winning, and he has enormous rejection, because he is the candidate that came in from the party that was in power for over a decade. So it's that kind of stream, and they are a left-wing party. So his name is Haddad, Fernando Haddad. And he is a guy who's if there was an opposite kind of two human beings together, he is a guy who is very aware of everything. He's a professor, he's an economist, he's a guy who's bringing a campaign that is just, is trying to bring a plan of government that is completely the opposite and the antithesis from what they're, but it's like that. The world seems to be so polarized, isn't it? So Brazil is only an example of what's happening around the world, but we have never had an election where two candidates were so different, and people are fighting. You know, people are fighting within families. They are falling out with each other. It's a very weird, polarized place to be.
One of the things I find really interesting with the dialogue with some of the other different polarized situations, I mean, obviously we've got Brexit in this country, most tremendous waste of time. It's unbelievable at this point in the environmental situation anyway, is that one of the things that patriarchy does really well is it makes people feel confident around that there's going to be food on the table and you're going to be warm in winter, and that there's a focus on the provision of taking care of families.
Yeah.
It may be misguided in the sense that those are only the people that have sometimes only the people that are credited within that community as being of worth. But nonetheless, I feel like it's really important for us to be bearing in mind that actually the people of Brazil, they deserve a break. You know, like they deserve it to be that they're feeling really enriched by how they move forwards. And in the time that I just spent like tuning in with some trees, as you do, my sense of it, oaks actually, my sense of it was that really education was the key. Like what Brazil has is so extraordinary in terms of its, you know, living libraries, in terms of the sort of wealth of the people, of the understanding, and of the potential to be leaders in conflict resolution, in really having understood about how we can be working with all sorts of different, you know, tree form, animal form, plant forms, and not just crushing them up and making them as medicines, but actually, you know, in understanding and respecting the gifts that they bring in their living form. And I obviously would really call for like there to be massive support from various other countries into the universities, into supporting the development of educational models that come out of the schools, that can be moving around the world in such an extraordinary way at this time. and also as that being that funding into teachers, that funding into the relationship between individuals looking to support the next generation and how they want to build their environment. So just flagging that up, that is a real, that's a real match for this idea that they could just sell off and allow other countries through the guise of this guy to just continue the rape of the Amazon that has been happening ever since Columbus.
Yeah. So Suzi, you're right about education, because education is a key point. The government that was in power, whose candidate is the opposition candidate, Fernando Haddad, they've actually created ways of poor people studying and reaching university for the first time in history. And that has not been gone well with the rich, with the privileged. Yeah, because you create educated populations, they will fight. They will not, accept what you want them to accept. And his plan for education, therefore, is great. And in contrast, this guy who is coming in, who probably will win, he's talking about, education is nothing. We should, in fact, his plan of education, he has talked about doing education from primary school at distance, creating a system where people wouldn't go to school. They would just be in front of computers and stuff. So education is a big thing, and it brings this, the people that are voting, 20%, I think 80% of the people that are voting to this guy have got then all the information via WhatsApp. This is a very, very worrying election, because there is no way in they're getting fake news. Everything else that is not coming. Yeah.
Well, I'm just thinking, I think let's just really try and make it so that what we're doing is really strengthening the narrative that we want to see. And I think in the case of, this guy, obviously he's got some things that seem very strong, but the truth is, long term, it's got to be education. It's got to be the next generation. And whether or not he wins on Sunday, I think we've got to accept what we are building and fueling with our hearts and creating as women and as what we want for the future and for holding that landscape, is that it is only a matter of time before it is the education and the support and the understanding of the science and the extraordinary gifts of that landscape is what we focus on. And whether or not there's a blip of this guy coming in for a small amount of time, or whether or not we just go straight into seeing things another way, let's just really, really strengthen that energy of believing in the next generation, in their needs to live in a peaceable, loving world, which allows them to access their gifts in relation to the forest, in relationship to the land. And I just really love to really call that in now. And we talked about doing a little visualization. So is there anything that you would like to mention before we went into that?
Say something. I read this beautiful thing, like phrases come to us in the right time. And this week I read this beautiful thing, which I wanted to share with the women on my yoga class. And it was just a phrase. It's called, grief does not change you, it reveals you. And maybe this collective grief that we might be feeling to our forest and to our resources, to natural resources, it can reveal on us some instinct to fight with love and unite. And so, just kind of in a personal level, there's a lovely phrase, but actually in a collective level, it can reveal what we can do as women to our planet, for Mother Earth.
I definitely relate to that, because I've been doing loads of stuff to do with the tree conference and highlighting practical strategies for reforestation and methods of landscape regeneration and legal structures and all this stuff, really focused very on outward activity. But it is this situation in Brazil where if they knock the hydrological cycles out and potentially knock out the rain, then it is my children whose crops won't grow in England. Yes. And the fact that we are potentially talking about something that could be the end of life as we know it, suddenly then I feel I have to speak on a more personal level. And so the visualization that I'm going to work with is how I work on a personal level. And I feel like that has been prompted in me by this situation that I have to tell you, like, this is my spiritual activism. this is where I'm coming from, and do this work first before I then do the outer work of the tree conference or working with different tree groups. Is there anything else you want to say before we have a little start?
No, I just want to be with you in your visualization and be here still sitting. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much for the place where that makes. Dear Tree Sisters, so our video cut out, and I'm going to need to re-record the visualization that Leticia and I did as our prayer for Brazil and for our children. I'm calling in our ancestors, our higher selves, our guides. I'm calling in the spirit of the children, of the future, of our children, and the children of all animals, fish, insect, fungal forms, calling in the spirits of earth, air, fire, and water, the spirits of the trees, the ecosystems, the oceans, the mountains, the grasslands, the weather systems, the upper atmosphere, the cloud beings, calling in the animal forms, the tree beings, the angels, the archangels, starseed beings from across the galaxies, looking to support and help at this time. I call in attention to our hearts and drop a gold cord, a gold thread down through, following gravity through the center, right until we reach the center of the earth. Allow that gold cord to strengthen and become a root. And whatever techniques you use, working with the idea that in your imaginal realm, you have complete control, complete power. So you get to work with whatever forms, whatever imagery works for you to really ensure you fully bring that connection down and it meets the consciousness of the earth. And you drink up your birthright. You command that you bring in the energy that sustains up into your root chakra, up into your womb, into your abdomen. We bring that energy up and we allow it to cycle, nourishing the womb, nourishing the abdomen. And for me, I imagine my chakras, my root chakra, my womb chakra spinning. It takes a while to get them going. I imagine them spinning to the point where they're like fighter jet engines, really pulling up a lot of energy up into the womb, up into the heart. And we're sending that up above, up through the upper atmosphere, up through and finding the brightest star and connecting with that and allowing the tinkly, sparkling energy to come down through the base, the top of the head, through down into the heart, and equally cycling that energy from the upper atmosphere, from the starseed beings, from our higher selves, down through us like a channel down into the earth. And in that position, we call in the mother trees, the great ones, to hold all male, female forms in a position of forgiveness, in a position where we see the virtue and the intention behind the desire to provide for families, to create wealth and create warmth and food that provide for families and provide for the landscape. And we really honour the desire to support the landscape in these ways. And we bring that into full alignment with the consciousness of the living earth and the long-term protection of the landscape. So really seeing trees, great big trees standing, supporting the men of Brazil, helping, holding their hands, allowing them to feel their awareness of the earth, the consciousness, the intelligence of it, and of the forests, and of the animals, and of their birthright to connect to the real feminine aspects that can support and nourish their systems and allow their brilliance and their intelligence and their wisdom to shine throughout the earth. And I call that the European countries, the American countries, the different countries around the world call an end to coveting the minerals and the golds and the timber of the South Americas. We ask for forgiveness for all that we have done to plunder, to rape, to steal from the South Americas for our own ends. And we call on the EU, we call on all governments to cease the extraction from South America. And we ask that in turn that the Brazilians feel the gold intact in their hearts and in their wisdom, in their educational structures, in what they can bring to the world through their conflict resolution, through their wisdom of living with biodiversity. And see Brazil shining so bright. And I see what's happening there to support the world in providing rights for nature, providing models for conflict resolution and peace that spreads across the world, and for massive investment in the universities and the teachers in the evolution of educational models that are landscape-based in Brazil, that teach the world, because we look to you in your brilliance, in your wisdom. We look to you to stand strong around what it is to protect your landscape, your children, your future, because we need that too. I raise up the people of Brazil, the teachers, the mothers, the fathers, the aunts, the uncles, the farmers, the scientists. We hold you in our hearts, and we will continue to do so, whatever the outcome is of the election, because we know that the long-term only option for the planet is the option that we seed in through our hearts as doorways of golden thread of the future that we can weave together for our children and for all creatures on the planet at this time. That is that we learn to work together in peace and harmony for the benefit of all life. In Brazil, you're the ones that have asked me to open this door to working this way, and for everything that you bring and everything that you will continue to bring. We back you up and support you with enormous amounts of love and gratitude. Thank you.